Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 5 of Centered Live. We are so glad to have you with us and hope that you enjoy our topic for tonight, which we'll introduce in a moment. But we just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that on Centered Live, our goal is to offer insights into how to maintain a balanced, centered life. And tonight, I think you're really going to enjoy our topic because we've got something special for you. So some of you may be aware, certainly those who are involved are very much aware that we have entered into what is often being called the golden age of board games. And it's interesting that with all of the electronics that are available and all of the video games that are available, that we have seen a definite resurgence of board games in the United States, and not just the United States, but it has swept through Europe and also into Asia. And so it's a really interesting phenomenon. We're going to explore this tonight. My guest tonight, and if you're looking at the names down below, you'll notice that we have with us somebody who's related to me. And if you look at our faces, you might even notice that there's some similarity there. The reason why is because Rick is my son. He's my oldest son. And I'm just absolutely thrilled to have him as a guest with me tonight as we talk about this golden age of board games. So professionally, I'm going to let Rick introduce himself and tell us a little bit about what he does to keep the lights on, as it were. But then we'll jump into his hobby, which is definitely board games.
Well, thanks. Yes, Rick Malloy, my day job, as it was, what keeps the lights on, as you said, is I am in water resources. I'm a water resource planner. So I dedicate all my days to figuring out how we are going to find water for everybody in the state of Utah. And that's a unique and fun challenge. I love going to work every day. And, this year especially is, a bit stressful, but also I am always up for a challenge, which is probably why I like board games. And so trying to figure out how we're going to make ends meet from the water perspective is what I do. And I love that as well.
And for those of you who are joining us from outside the West, as in specifically outside of Utah, you may not be aware, especially if you've been watching the storms that have been pounding the east and central U.S., you may not be aware that we are in one of the worst drought seasons of our recorded history. And so all of our lakes and reservoirs are at all-time lows. And in fact, there's even been a lot of concern voiced about the Great Salt Lake drying up. So Rick has his job cut out for him and for the rest of us. And we really appreciate your efforts, Rick, in trying to figure those very complicated resource management issues that you certainly do very well with, and try to find how we can slow the flow and make it all work for us, even as Utah, among other states here in the West, continue to grow in our population. But as you noted, and as everybody can see behind you, Rick is a board game expert, and he takes this hobby to its own level of enjoyment and serious fun. Let's put it that way. So, Rick, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you are and what we're seeing behind you?
Yeah, so this is my game room. So I have a space in my house dedicated to board gaming. So I've got the shelves behind me and around me, full of games, and a dedicated board game table and dedicated board game chairs, and space for me to host regular board game nights with friends. And like you can see here, this is just a small sample of the collection of games that I have, and I try really hard to curate a selection that is important to me, important to my family as well. So a lot of games I pick out just maybe for a specific person. I'm like, ooh, they would really like this one, so I'm going to hold on to it. And a lot of games come and go too. So
we're going to
not
talk
every
about
game
that
is
a little
good.
bit later. Yeah, we definitely need, because this is fascinating to me that you actually cycle through your games. And so we definitely need to bring that up a little bit later. The other thing for those of you who are watching that you cannot see is that this room, which is in his basement, connects with a family room that has a very impressive theater system in it. And so it's not like the only thing that Rick and his family do is play games, although pretty much any weekend night they're gathered around that table and they're playing a game. But they do have the ability to do an immersive sound system movie night as well. And I definitely enjoyed that when I've been with his family. So it's fun. It's a fun game room. It's a fun room to be in, to be sure. So, Rick, why do you think we are seeing such a massive resurgence in board games in a world that seems to be dominated, in fact, by high definition digital screens? I mean, what's going on?
Well, I think there's a few factors, and there's definitely been some more recent contributing factors. But I think one, our our digital consumption, whether that's TV or um, TikTok, all the way down to the video games that we've played, um, it's all becoming more isolated. And so
Mm,
I think while we enjoy media, I think a lot of times we enjoy media with other people. There's a missing component, and that's being with your friends. I remember when I would play video games growing up, it was always more than one person sitting at a couch or sitting on the floor playing a game together. Even if it was a single person game, you had three friends waiting for you to die in the game so that they could take the controller. But it was very much a community event.
yeah.
Um,
And I
and
remember when you growing up that you would bring the friends over and sometimes the screen would be, divided up into multiple sections and it was just as many controllers as you could plug into the game console and man, it was a riot. Sometimes almost literally a riot.
yeah, so really in the last 20 years, we've migrated slowly away from that. It's even difficult to find video games that allow you to share a screen and be in the same room. And there's some advantages to playing online with friends around the globe. But I do think what it did create is a hunger or an appetite for being together with other people. And I
Mhm.
think more recently, the big catalyst was the COVID shutdown where we couldn't
Okay.
be with each other. I think that really, people realized what they missed and they searched out opportunities to connect with each other. And as a family, I think we're trying really hard. I know I try really hard with my own kids. What can we do together that doesn't involve a screen? And it's
Excellent.
really
Excellent.
hard when you're playing a board game with your family to have a screen. Just everybody's invested in that game, and it's really easy to just ignore
That's
life
great.
around you.
That's great. I will tell you that I've noticed that in the classroom, some of my students are actually playing games on their phones with each other. I mean, it's a multiplayer kind of a scenario. And, at some point I kind of clue into what they're playing and they're playing the same game. And it's like, okay, whoa, stop. That's not the environment that you're supposed to be doing that as opposed to, working on something that we're doing in the classroom. Anyway, it's kind of funny. And when I cued into that, it was like, oh my goodness. Okay, what I really think is interesting too is that, of course, you were talking about growing up with with games, and certainly you and we remember some of the board games that we played, such as Stratego and Battleship, and we played our share of Monopoly and a few other board games. Oh, Masterpiece was one that I think that we all enjoyed quite a bit. What's really interesting, though, is that when we look at the popularity of board games, and before we dive into any of the new stuff, which we're certainly going to talk about, let's talk about the king of board games, which, of course, the number one board game in the world is Monopoly. And it's like, it is the reigning champion. What is the draw to Monopoly?
Well, and I've had this conversation with a lot of individuals over the years. I think there's two commonalities. One is nostalgia.
Okay.
Everybody grew up with Monopoly.
Right.
And so it makes it extremely easy for us to reference Monopoly as a board game. It's in modern television, it's in modern movies. Everybody thinks to that point when they think of a board game, whether that's a good relationship or a bad relationship, that's where their mind goes. The other probably major factor is where it sits on a shelf. Anywhere you go, whether it's the grocery store or any kind of hobby store, bookstore, you're going to find a copy of Monopoly. So it's
true.
And they continue to print and reprint every version you could possibly imagine. So if you want to put an IP onto Monopoly, someone out there will sell it. Now, I'm also fairly convinced that nobody is playing these games. They're buying Monopoly and never playing it. I'm fairly convinced on that point.
Well, I know that I grew up playing Monopoly, and I will tell you that when I was teaching financial literacy, there was one day when I said, okay, everybody, we're going to play Monopoly. And the kids, I'm teaching high school kids, juniors and seniors, and they're going, yeah, Monopoly. And they did. And they all knew the rules. And they set up, I think, 2 or 3 boards. And so they dove in, and I told them, I said, okay, you have to keep track of the amount of money that you have at the end of the game, and you have to report that back to me. That's how I justified, it's like, okay, it's homework. Anyway, it was fun, and it was enjoyable to recognize that Monopoly does have a place in our heart, even if it may not be, like you said, may not be actively played as much as people. It is still a fascinating a game, and it's relatively easy to learn, and you go around the board, you collect the properties, and you build up the money. There is a version, and you probably know this, that instead of having the cash, you actually swipe a credit card like digital bank card that keeps track of how much you have in the bank, and then you swipe it when you have to pay something or pay somebody. Anyway, and that one, when you're talking about buying a property, it's more realistic. Instead of hundreds of dollars, it's millions of dollars. And anyway, that one is in particular, I think, a way of how Monopoly has continued to develop with the times. And like you said, every possible theme that you can think of, because there's Star Wars Monopoly, there's Star Trek Monopoly, there's world domination Monopoly, there's every theme, Barbie and Lego, and everybody's got their flavor of Monopoly out there. So it's yeah. And I think there's a reason that, it may be that nostalgic connection, but I think also it's one of those things where pretty much everybody grows up knowing how to play it. And so whether it's played frequently or less regularly, it's familiar. So of course, me being a historian, I had to do some research and had to look up some information about board games. And it's interesting to me because when we talk about sometimes the timeline of board games, and it's so easy for us to think of Monopoly and Clue and some of the Game of Life, for example, some of the ones that have been out for a long time. Sorry is another good one that's been out for decades, right? But we forget that the original board game was actually chess and invented in about 1200 AD. It's not the oldest board game, but it is one that we forget. And the records show that total number of units sold since its beginning, of course, is unknown, but every year, 3 million sets of chess are sold in the US alone. And it's like, wow. I had no idea that chess continues to be so popular. Second only to chess is, in fact, checkers. And checkers predates chess by 3,000 years. In fact, it's noted that it was invented sometime around 3000 BC and estimated to have sold some 50 billion units since its introduction, 5,000 years ago. Number 3 on the list of all-time best-selling games is, in fact, Monopoly, which was invented in 1935 in the middle of the Great Depression. 275 million units have been sold since then. Number 4 is Scrabble, which was invented in 1938. Number 5 is Clue, which was originally invented in 1949, but I think it had pretty significant resurgence, especially when the movie came out. And I know in our household, we watched the movie and all of its various endings multiple times and then went and played the game. Battleship is a really interesting, because Battleship is number 6, but Battleship was originally released as a card game in 1931, and it wasn't really considered a table game until its release in 1961, with over 100 million units sold. Trivial Pursuit, 100 million units sold. Backgammon, which is another oldie, being invented sometime in about 3000 BC. Candyland is a old one for us. 1949 is when it came on the scene. Rummy Cub, or sometimes people call it Rummy Cube, was invented in 1950. 50 million units have been sold since. Game of Life, the current version, the one that we all know, was invented in 1960 with about 50 million units sold. Othello, 1883, is number 12. Yahtzee, invented in 1954, is number 13. Pictionary, 1985. And I remember in our house, we didn't really like Pictionary because some of you were artists and some of us were not. Settlers of Catan, which I would say, Rick, arguably may have been the game that kind of kicked off this new resurgence of board games, was invented in 1995 and has sold 32 million units since its introduction. Risk is an older one, 1957. Stratego, 1961. Another old game is Mancala, 1400 BC, an estimated 18 million units sold. And then here's another one that I think you and I would certainly agree was a major influence in this resurgence of games, and that is Ticket to Ride, invented in 2004, but 18 million units sold since then. And then the last one on my list was Apples to Apples, the card game. And it's still a table game, even though we wouldn't call it necessarily a board game. There are board versions of it, but that one invented in 1998 with 15 million units sold. So there's a rich diversity there, old and new. And when I say old, I mean ancient old. So ultimately, when we think about all of this, why do you think the ancient games have endured alongside the more modern hits like Ticket to Ride?
That's a good question. Well, it's funny when we talk about new games
Yeah,
or modern games,
right.
we often refer to things as like evergreen or things that stand the test of time. And really, what we're talking about is like a decade. Like a new game, if it sells for more than a decade, it's got some staying power.
Okay.
When we look
Okay.
at things like chess or backgammon, really what I think we're looking at is a game that has cultural significance,
Okay.
and so a lot of cultures have games that are significant to their culture, and that could
Yeah.
be
The game
you
of
know
Go would be one of those, very
exactly
popular throughout Asia. Yeah.
exactly, and some are maybe feature elements of dexterity. You see the big tables, and they're flicking discs across, and so every culture has some game that I think just resonates within every community and every home, and everybody's familiar with it within that culture, and um, and then there's some that transcend cultures, and I think that that's probably games like chess, where there's familiarity across the globe, and you
Right.
have people
Right.
who play it in all corners, and I think the other thing is that the games are balanced. If a game is not balanced, then it falls. It ultimately fails, right? Somebody has
Okay.
found
So
a
what do you
way
mean by
to,
balance?
well, I think it's, if somebody finds a way to exploit a game so that one side wins, or there's a favor, or there's a
Consistently.
special,
Consistent. Okay.
yeah, there's a special trick, right? There's a move
Oh,
that I can make that will always win, right? Well, with chess, there's games where it's all about strategy, right? And so these strategic games offer an opportunity to play them and replay them and replay them and replay them and have different
right.
experiences, um, uh, playing different strategies and trying new things. Then there's games of chance. You think of you mentioned Yahtzee on the list. There's lots
Right.
more games than Yahtzee, but that's another game where every game is going to be different because of the luck factor. It's high luck, high risk, high reward. You're trying to figure out how many dice you're going to roll and what to
Right.
hold on to. That has staying power because it feels different every time you play. It's a little bit different, and so I think some of these games that have lasted a long time fall into these categories
Okay.
of being there and being different, and being able to apply different strategies and
Right.
being
Right.
competitive, um and so I think I think aside from the cultural element, which I think is probably root to a lot of this, the ability for a game to last, it involves these other elements.
It
I've
makes
seen a
sense.
lot of games come and go, and usually they come and go because they're either not very good or they have some broken mechanism to them where
Okay. All
people
right.
are, oh, I can't play that.
It's so interesting. And I love the fact that you were referencing Yahtzee with its luck mechanism, right? If we call it a mechanism. Um, and your mom and I, we still love to play Yahtzee, and we'll play a lot of times when we're watching a movie. And it's usually a movie that's not going to be an intense movie, right? It's just it's on, and maybe it's one that we've seen before, but we want to see it again, and so we'll be passing the Yahtzee container back and forth, and but she hates the fact that I've been keeping statistics on wins and losses and most Yahtzees in a row and least Yahtzees in a row. She thinks I'm silly when I tabulate every score sheet. I add, the information back to the ongoing set of statistics. But anyway,
Well,
here's a
like
statistic. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like father, like son. I also track all of my board game plays, so I have statistics to
Oh my
review.
gosh. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, I was going to say, here's another statistic for you. Which country, and this is probably not going to be terribly hard, but which country in all the world do you think has the most board game in terms of sales and units?
It's got to be the United States, but
Yeah,
it could be pretty close behind. Asia is growing in popularity, and Europe certainly has a very large board
absolutely,
game.
absolutely. And it may be in part because we've got 380 billion, not billion, million people, and half of them are young. But the United States accounts for over $1.75 billion in game revenue, which is more than half of the global market. So, what is it about American culture that you think drives that level of consumption?
Well, I think our culture is one of consumerism. So
Okay.
already we're starting off ahead of the game. We very much, everything revolves around consumerism
Yep.
and buying
Yep.
new things and interesting things. But I think beyond that, we we've leveraged an opportunity within, like I think about social media, I think
Okay.
about YouTube, I think about the internet and other avenues, and there's a lot of opportunity to be exposed to games at a
Okay.
modern level that I think do drive a lot of consumerism. We have big board game events. We've got expos and all kinds of
Yeah. We're going to come back to
tools.
that because you were just at an expo. Yeah.
Yep. So we've got all kinds of tools that I think market games. I
Hmm.
also think that they are, I mean, when we're at the grocery store, you're going to find a game, whether it's a card
Or
game or a
Barnes and
board game.
Noble or
Yep.
Target. I think Target does a magnificent job at how they market their entire, and it's a huge game section that they always have. Yeah.
Yep. So I think we're exposed to a lot more. It's a lot more common to see them. We also, I mean, are not having spent a ton of time around the world, but a little bit. When you go into a grocery store in Europe or Asia, there's not it's not huge, right? You don't have shelf space dedicated
Mm,
to board games.
mm.
So people's
Wow.
exposure is, I think, a little bit limited,
Okay.
where we really, everywhere you go, whether it's, like you said, a Barnes and Noble, a grocery store, a Walmart, a Target, um, you're going to find it. And then certainly Amazon. You're going
Right.
to find a lot of games
Right.
on Amazon. Plus, game stores in and of
Which
themselves
is in
exist.
and itself kind of a unique, um, it's like stores cropping up everywhere. That's all they do is they focus on board games and other kinds of tactile games. Certainly, role playing games have become just phenomenally huge, and as a result, a lot of those stores I know have game playing areas. In fact, they whether they invite people in for the enjoyment and the sociality, or whether they actually make some money on tournaments. It's amazing to me at how it seems like every town, if not cities with multiple game centers, have that as a um, part of the social culture.
Yeah, and it probably wouldn't be surprising to anybody who's watching, but I have a friend who owns a game store that lives. The game store is not too far from my house,
Uh-oh.
and they have a dedicated play area. They have
Mm-hmm.
tournaments. They have games every night. They've got something going on. A lot of their revenue comes from collectible card games like Magic the
Mm-hmm.
Gathering and
Of course.
Pokemon. But
Right.
for a game store in, suburban Utah outside of Salt Lake, they grossed over $6 million in sales last year for
Oh
a small game
my.
store. So,
Wow.
this is a market that is thriving. Um, there's a lot of people out there that are looking for connection. They're looking for their own communities.
Right. Right.
Schools now have board game clubs. as
Yes,
part of the
absolutely.
schools. And so it really is, back to the previous point, it's a community for people, and it's very
Yeah,
open and inviting,
right,
and
right.
there's a space for everybody at the tables, at all kinds of events, and people can find a theme that fits whatever they're interested in.
Right. I agree. And having just recently relocated from Wisconsin, and we you can imagine big cities, right, that would have multiple game stores. But what was impressive to me is that even the smaller cities like Oshkosh, like Fond du Lac, like Neenah, they definitely had game stores, and they were always busy. And sometimes, it would be like me walking in just curious, right, to see what they had. And then what I did is frequently I would snap a picture and say, "Oh, this is one that I think Rick would really enjoy," or "This is one that I think that Melissa and her family would really enjoy." And then at some point, it's like, okay, I've done some research and I should buy those and send them out to my kids. But anyway, so let's talk about your, I don't know if we should dare say, um, a an addiction. Your wife might think it's an addiction. I don't know, maybe. But let's talk about the collector's perspective. Okay. So, out of the thousands of board game titles that are out there, and certainly I know that you've been through hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, what are your top three and what makes them special to you?
That is a really good question. And I will say that my tops are always changing.
Okay.
And maybe I'll talk a little bit about my my top three for different reasons.
Okay.
But
That's like asking me what my favorite movies are. It's like, what category are we talking about? I get it. I get it.
So, right now, my number one favorite game is a game called Age of Steam,
Okay.
and it's just right back over here in the corner.
All right.
And it's a train game, and
Okay.
it's not only just a regular train game, but it's an economic stock market
Okay.
style train game. And in that game, I have more than a dozen maps, that all have different types of rule sets. And anyways,
Interesting.
um, it's a very strategic game. There's zero luck involved. It's very unforgiving. Um, but it's enjoyable, but you have to have the right group of people to play it with. Now,
Okay.
I contrast that with probably my second favorite game, and that is Ticket to Ride, but not just any Ticket to Ride. Ticket to Ride Legends of the West. And why this is my favorite game is because it is a game that I play with my family, and we
Okay.
absolutely love this game. But it's not just a regular game, it's a game that you only play through one time. So it has chapters, and each chapter in that game changes the way that the game's state is. And so in this game, it's Ticket to
Ah,
Ride, it's a train game, but you're building and constructing your train
right.
from the east to the west coast. And so you're building a map, and you're building routes, and you're changing the state of the game. And once you've completed your east to west route, the game's over. And in fact,
How interesting.
you
Now
can't play it again,
interesting.
really. But my family absolutely they absolutely love that game. And my other favorite game right now is a game, and I'll bring it out here, and it's the most boring looking game you could imagine, but it's called Barrage.
Okay.
And this game uh, is one that mixes my day job with my hobby, and it is
Hmm.
water planning, constructing dams, building hydroelectric facilities, and it's still an economic game. these games are all complex, but I do love all weights of games, all themes of games. A lot of times I will pick a theme based on maybe somebody who might really like that theme. My daughter is a really big animal fan. If you've
Right.
ever met her, she
Yep.
will never stop talking about all the animals that she wants and loves and has. And so I recently picked up a game called Cat Tower,
Oh,
just for my daughter, and we've played it several times. And in that game, so imagine you've got everything from a train game where you're building, or an economic game, or a battle game where you're, good versus evil, whatever have you, all
okay.
the way down to Cat Tower, where you're actually constructing a little card tower and moving a cat up, and you're trying to get
Oh
as
my
high as you
goodness.
can go before the whole thing comes crashing down. So,
Huh.
games, I think, um, I really do think that there's something for everybody. So my favorite game is going to be very different than somebody else's favorite
Of course.
game.
Of
But
course.
I'm happy to play almost any game, any genre. The only game that I told my kids I won't play with them is Monopoly.
All right, fair enough. Well, and certainly, I have enjoyed some of the games. My criteria is almost always I got to be able to learn it quick, and it's got to be less than an hour long. So make it easy, make it fast, and I'm all in. So that's great. That's great. So I happen to know also something about you, and I'm sure that it's not unique to you, but certainly you have expressed multiple times as you buy a new game that a lot of times it's because of the artistry of the board or the cards or the pieces, the tokens themselves, and it seems to me that that beyond just the play, that you definitely enjoy the craftsmanship, or even, like I say, the artisan aspect of the game as well. And in fact, I know that you're very particular that, especially with those that do seem to have, um, high illustrations on the cards, that you put them in special sleeves to keep them protected. And maybe you do that with all your games. I'm not sure, but what what do you look at beyond the game itself, and when you look at a box, is that something that's going to tell you what's inside, or how do you approach that?
Yeah, that so for sure. A box, much like a book cover, is going to be a lot of times the thing that draws you in,
Hmm.
and and art plays such a huge role in board
Sure, just
games,
like a book, like you said.
but it goes a step further. I think
Okay.
a clever artist or a good team of artists and developers are going to develop the art in a way that either contributes to the feeling of the game,
Hmm.
right? They're trying to
Hmm.
set a tone or a theme, but more than that, they're going to try and guide you through the game process, right? I've played games that are extremely messy and hard to see what's happening on the
Yeah.
board,
Yeah.
and and that's it could be distracting, it could be confusing, it could be illegible, so you
There you
can't
go.
see what you're trying to do, or it could, things could block other parts of the board that are
Hmm.
needed to be
Hmm.
seen, and you contrast that to an artist and team who knows what they're doing, and they can lead you and almost make learning and playing the game easier with
Okay.
the art and the art style that's chosen. And I didn't used to, when I first started collecting or purchasing board games,
Hmm.
it might have been a little bit, okay, this looks interesting, I'm going to try this. This looks interesting, I'm going to try this. And I never thought I'd learn the names of artists who work on board games and
Oh,
start to
interesting.
develop a preference. So there's an artist named Ian O'Toole, and he works on games to make them easier to play from a
Oh,
design
wonderful.
standpoint. And then there's other artists who are famous artists, ones that have done designs and books for like Lord of the Rings, and
Of course.
companies will entice them to come in and do the art for their game, and it becomes a very interesting um, interesting driver for the hobby.
Sure,
What's
sure.
also interesting is people who cut corners. Um, the people in the hobby are pretty unforgiving of bad art. It's if a
Okay.
game has bad art, it probably isn't going to do very well. And if a game right now, the kind of interesting controversy within board games is there's really a lot of opposition towards AI art.
Okay.
They're trying to hold on to and promote artists. All of this is kind of a discretionary hobby, right? It's
Right. Of
something that
course.
is not necessary. And so when we spend our discretionary money, we want to support artists, we want to support designers, we want to support
Oh,
new
wonderful.
ideas. And
Wonderful.
so it's a little bit interesting to see such a response within a board game community.
Yeah, and certainly I'm aware that games can be very very simple, like throw burrito, and sometimes I think games appeal to a certain kind of player. Like Exploding Kittens has never been one that I thought would be up, for me, right? Um, but again, I do appreciate a game that is well laid out. The other thing that I wanted to ask you, Rick, is that you had mentioned earlier that you actually cycle through your games, and so that means that you are buying a game, but at some point you are reselling that game. So a couple questions here. Number one, how do you decide which games to resell versus which ones to keep? And then also, is there any sort of uh, is there is there a market for games that well, I guess what I'm wondering about is, do games actually increase in value, or is it always going to be a loss and you're just selling them to get something new?
Yeah, no, good question. So it may not look like it from what's behind me, but I have limited shelf space, and I'm always interested in what new games come in, but I very intentionally ask myself, a few questions, and on whether or not I want to keep a game. One is that, have I played it within the last year? If I haven't played
Okay.
it within the last year, maybe I won't get to it in the next year either. And then the next question I ask is, can I easily replace the game? Now, some games are reprinted pretty regularly, and some games are also really available on the secondhand market. So if I
Okay.
get rid of a game and I regret it, can I get it back? And if I can answer both of those questions pretty easily, then a lot of times I'll just get rid of a game to make space for something new.
Okay.
Um, and I have found a lot of opportunity to sell games on Facebook Marketplace or other avenues where I'm happy to let somebody else play this game if they're interested in that game. Even if it wasn't for me, it might be a very good game, but maybe not something that I personally enjoy
Right.
or something
Right.
that my family enjoyed. And so it's easy for me to get rid of it. Now, some games very much do increase in value. There's a lot of indie publishers or small print runs for games where once they've printed that game, there's no intention of ever printing that game again.
Oh,
And
interesting.
because of that, there's a scarcity, and sometimes those games get very sought after. They're a very hot item, and maybe they've been out of print for a number of years, and
Hmm.
struggle to get the rights. If a company goes under or a company doesn't want to reprint it, it can be really challenging for anybody to ever try and reprint that game again. So for that reason, I have a handful of games that are worth 5 times what I paid the game,
Oh,
just
wow.
because
Wow.
it's a scarce game. And it could be a small card game, a small card game. You look on eBay, you could find it for $300 or $400, and I spent $12 on it. So
Wow.
but that's it's an interesting thing, because sometimes over time they will get reprinted, and people probably feel really bad if they spend a bunch of money on a game. I try not to do that.
Well, and in fact, one of the things that we've also mentioned already is that you were just recently in Las Vegas for a board game convention. Uh, I'm just curious, do they have some of these older, more valuable games that are available for purchase there at these game conventions? And after you answer that question, maybe go ahead and tell us what this board game convention was like, why you were there, and what your impression was of the convention.
Yeah, so yes, a lot of conventions have like board game swap meets. And so it sounds exactly like it is. And people have a table and they set up and they've got a whole bunch of games that they're wanting to sell. And that's really a lot of times the best way to find out of print, hard to find games. And usually
Okay.
people are willing to let them go at a good deal. Nobody's really looking to price gouge during a swap meet. So it's a good place to find older out of print games. And this last convention that I went to, I had a list of games that I was looking to find, and I found what I was looking for. So it was great. It worked out really well. And so, yeah, I went to a board game convention called Dice Tower West in Las Vegas. And Dice Tower is probably the number one YouTube channel when it comes to board games. And the main guy over the Dice Tower YouTube channel, Tom Vassell, he's been in the community for almost 30 years or close to 30
Okay.
years. As long as YouTube's been around, he's been putting out YouTube videos reviewing new board games and talking about the board
Interesting.
games that he enjoys and loves. And so they, for quite a few years, have been putting on conventions in the East and in the West. And what they do is they bring a library of thousands of games that you
Oh
can
my
play.
goodness.
So if you have any appetite to play any game you could think of, you can come and play it. They also have new hot games, games that are hard to find, or
Right. Makes sense.
maybe not even printed yet or will be out soon. You can play new games. They also have publishers and other people selling and demoing games, and that's actually why I was there.
That's what you were there for, right? You were there to rep and demo a game.
Yep. So I was working for a company, and they were generous enough to pay for my way and my hotel and my pass in exchange for me demoing a new game that they had on Kickstarter. So it's a game that was just, had just been being developed, and they were trying to get support as part of this Kickstarter. And so I spent 4 days demoing and
Wow.
teaching the game to people, and I just had a blast doing it. And everybody that played the game loved playing it, and it was such a good
That's a good
experience.
sign.
And so I did that in the afternoons, and after I was done, I had a library of 1,000 games. So me and some friends, we played games all night. So it was kind
Wow.
of a fun experience. and
Did you
and
sleep at all while you were there?
I slept a little bit, but I tried to prioritize playing games over anything else. But
Wonderful.
these conventions, they range everything from where I was, which is more centered around playing games. They
Okay.
have the library, all the way to Essen and Gamma Expo and PAX Unplugged and these other games or these other conventions where they're more focused on selling or promoting their company or their brand or
Okay.
their catalog of games. And so that, just like you might go to another expo where you're trying to check out designers, there's a lot of opportunity to go and like pitch ideas for new games or to get play
Oh,
testers for
very
new games.
interesting.
And so
Very.
there's, people go to conventions for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
And there's some that lean more on the side where they're, trying to develop rooms where you can play games versus rooms where you're just kind of looking at new games and trying to decide what you can fit in your suitcase to bring back home with you.
Sure. So were all of these then what we would call table games as opposed to video games, or was there a segment there of video games?
Nope, it was entirely board
Okay.
games,
Okay.
tabletop games, and more specifically, the like more hobby board games. You're not going to
Right.
find
Right.
there's in all complexity levels, right? You're going to find everything from kids games and dice games to heavy, complex, 5-hour type games. So.
Right. Right. Well, and I know that we could ask questions about tactile games versus video games, and I, having uh, had the opportunity to serve in the Air Force and to do a little bit of flying, I know that recruiters today in the Air Force, for example, are very much interested in young people who have had video game experience, especially if it's a flight simulator, and because it provides a skill level that certainly wasn't available to me at the time when I was in flight training. But what I think I want to do is I want to go towards more the idea. This question here, beyond just fun, what values do you see being built when people sit down for a multiplayer game?
Well, I think the game can inherently provide some value. Not all games are the same in that criteria, but you can, there's a whole section of the hobby that's focused on historic and accurate events. You have war games, you have
Yes.
games revolving around a very specific political race or a period in time. And so you can
Interesting.
reenact events. So I think at a very like fundamental level, you could play a game that represents something that can teach you something about that point in history or
Wow.
that that conflict. But beyond that, I think the values that I see at a table and something that I see with my family and with my friends is um, you're learning something about people in a way that you can't really achieve in a lot of other avenues, but you're learning
Okay.
about honesty, you're learning about credibility. Sometimes you're forced into situations where your whole job is to lie and cheat. That could be the design of the game, right? How well is this
Snake
person
oil.
good at
Good
this?
game.
But the idea is that you're learning something about yourself and you're learning something about the people that you're with, their character, who they are, um, their temperament, their
Mhm. True.
abilities.
True.
And when I play games with my family, it's how many times has there been, oh, I made a mistake, can I go back and fix that? Well, of course you can. We're here enjoying this time together, and there's no high stakes here. There is a World Series of board gaming where there's high stakes. People are trying to play for a ring, but in every game I've ever played with friends and with family, it's all about just enjoying each other's company. And there's nothing, that says if you make a mistake, you can't go back and fix it, or just enjoy the process,
Well,
win or lose.
yeah, and I love that. That actually needs to be a major theme or a major message throughout all school, is that it's okay to make mistakes. We learn from our mistakes and we move forward. I love that. That's fantastic. And plus, again, like we said, it's very much a social driven um, uh, activity to do, and it brings people close together, and you talk and you explore, and sometimes, like you said, you learn, okay, this person gets really upset when when these things happen, and yeah, for sure, you and I both have had those experiences. Okay, so a little bit of advice for our listeners, Rick. Some of these box games, especially, can be really expensive. I mean, I remember the first time I saw the price tag on Ticket to Ride, I thought $70, and I'm sure that that's medium pricing now, but I just remember thinking I can't afford that, and I eventually ended up buying online to get the price down. Um, for someone who's looking to start their collection or just getting into board gaming again without breaking the bank, what is your best advice?
Well, that's a good question. I think one, this idea or this pressure to have lots of games is probably counter to where the hobby should be going. So I think
Okay.
having a few games that you play and that you enjoy is
I can put
outstanding.
all
And
of
for
my
most,
games in one closet, by the way. I'm just saying.
but there are a lot of ways to get into board gaming. So one, board game stores often have libraries where you can rent games. I know that the
Oh,
store that I go to, you can rent a game for $5. And when you bring the game back, as long as it has all its pieces, you get that $5 in in-store credit. And you can
wow.
rent as many games as you want. Libraries now are starting to carry board games, and so
No
you can go
kidding.
to your public library and check out a board game, just
I
like
had
you
no
could check
idea.
out a book. And if
Excellent.
your library does not have board games, you can ask them to get them, and they will. So it's something that they do. A lot of libraries have them available, and
Okay.
so even if you don't want to spend any money, there are tools available at your disposal. Now, if you do have money, I always tell people, look on Facebook Marketplace. Don't go to eBay, but look, likely your community has a board game exchange Facebook page. And
Oh,
you can, and I promise you, if you say, help me, I would like a board game to play with my family, you'll have 100 people giving you board games. So it honestly is a really great community. I've sold a lot of board games, and I'm not. I never try and turn a profit. Usually, if I play a board game and I bought, I spent $50 on a board game and I played it 2 or 3 times and I got 5-6 hours of good use out of that board game, I don't feel bad at all selling it for $30, right?
okay.
you know
Okay.
it's that's cheaper than a trip to the movies for 3 hours or 5 hours or whatever.
For
so
a family, that's true. That is so true.
so I feel like there's a lot of opportunities, and beyond that, games are right now um, pretty expensive to make and produce. They're very
I know
complex.
the profit margins are really razor thin. Yeah.
But what we're seeing right now is that the pendulum is kind of swinging back. We're seeing more simple games that can be produced with
Oh, good. For
cards.
me.
Well, I wouldn't say simple from the perspective of rules
Okay.
necessarily, but
Okay.
simple from the perspective of components.
Okay.
So, there's some games that have 400 miniatures and they're 12 boxes and
Oh,
they're
right.
hundreds of
Right.
dollars, down to a card game or a small
Yeah.
box game that was
Warhammer comes to mind.
yeah, right, right.
Okay. Well, and I know earlier you had shared with me a website. Do you, and what we'll do is we'll put the link to that website in our comments section, but remind us of what that website is, Rick.
Yeah, so most people who are familiar with the hobby use a website called Board Game Geek. And Board Game Geek is a massive forum. And that forum, on that forum, they have every board game ever created. And you can go in and search that board game, and you can find everything you need to know about that board game,
That would
including
be very helpful. Yeah.
right, including its rating. So those
Okay.
ratings, so people rate those games. You could find their complexity, the mechanisms involved in that game, the number of players that would play that game, and then there's an area where you can ask questions. If you come up with, you have a disagreement at the table over a particular rule, you can put it in the chat
Which
and somebody will answer your
definitely
question.
happens.
So it is it's a huge resource that I think can feel a little bit endless, but if you go there with a mission in mind, if you're looking at a certain board game, there's people there to help out as well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Rick, for being with us tonight. It's been so much fun, and not just fun because you're my son, but fun because this is a really, really cool phenomenon that I think deserves some visibility and some attention, and I think that it deserves to stay. I hope that that this is not just a 2 or 3 decade long trend, but I hope that this is something that stays with us as human beings, because it seems so interesting to me, again, as a historian, that when you think about ancient games, because we know that our ancient ancestors actually developed and played a variety of games, and some of it was for learning purposes, learning skills, and some of it was just for the relaxation and the enjoyment of entertainment. But when you think about games like Mancala, or from 1400 BC to apples now, and ultimately what we see is that human nature hasn't really changed that much in 5,000 years. We really just want to sit down. We want to sit across from somebody and play a game and just have fun, enjoy the game. Any final thoughts there, Rick?
My last thought would just be that if you're nervous or if you're apprehensive about playing a modern board game, just try and find a theme that interests you. One of my wife's favorite games is Wingspan, and the whole game is dedicated to birds. And the reason she loves it is on each card is a illustration of a unique bird, and it talks a little bit about each bird. And for her, there's just a lot of enjoyment in looking at each card and discovering something new that you haven't seen before. And
Wonderful.
And there's something out there for every individual, and try and find that and just play it. Just give it a go. And if you didn't catch the first time, try again. And if you still don't like it, just sell it on Facebook.
There you go. There you go.
Try something else.
Something else. Wonderful. Marvelous. And thanks to our listeners and watchers, our audience tonight. Please make sure that you like and subscribe and stay tuned to Centered Live.